deliver me from all my fears. They looked to him and were radiant, and their faces were not ashamed. This poor man cried out, and the Lord heard him and saved him out of all of his troubles. The angel of the Lord encamps all around those who fear him and delivers them. Oh, taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed, happy is the man who trusts in him. Oh, fear the Lord, you his saints. There is no want to those who fear him. The young lions lack and suffer hunger, but those who seek the Lord shall not lack any good thing. Come, you children, listen to me. I will teach you the fear of the Lord. Who is the man who desires life and loves many days that he may see God? Keep your tongue from evil and your lips from speaking deceit. Depart from evil and do good. Seek peace and pursue it. The eyes of the Lord are on the righteous, and his ears are open to their cry. And the face of the Lord is against those who do evil, to cut off the remembrance of them from the earth. The righteous cry out, and the Lord hears, and delivers them out of their troubles. The Lord is near to those who have a broken heart, and saves such as have a contrite spirit. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. He guards all his bones, not one of them is broken. Evil shall slay the wicked, and those who hate the righteous shall be condemned. The Lord redeems the soul of his servants, and none of those who trust in him shall be condemned. Let's pray. Lord, I come to you today thankful, encouraged, blessed because of who you are and who I get to be in you. I pray, Father, that you'd help me to proclaim your word today with power and passion and boldness. Help me to speak, Lord, in ways that everyone understands. Help me to speak, Lord, in ways that pleases you. Help me, God, to speak so everyone can hear. And help me, God, to do it today as if I would never, ever get to do it again. In Jesus' name, amen. Have you ever had a close call? Have you ever had a close call, one of those ones that was so close that if it was just a little bit either way, maybe you wouldn't be here today? There was a guy who had a cell phone picture and he wanted to show his pastor, and it gave his pastor chills when he saw it. He was a landscaper, was pulling a bobcat on a trailer behind his truck. He was going about 40 miles an hour, and the fork attachments on the front of the bobcat began to vibrate. And one of them came loose, and the fork fell off the bobcat, off the trailer, and the tip of the fork hit the pavement, and the force of the impact transformed the fork into a boomerang. And the fork propelled itself back toward the truck. And as the landscaper was driving, the 75-pound fork pierced through the back window of his truck and ended up over the top of the passenger seats of the cab. A couple inches either way would have killed himself and the passengers. A very close call. So what do you and I do in a moment like that? What comes out of our mouth after something like that happens? What happens when God just saves you from a very serious situation? Do you pray a little differently? Maybe you and I sing with a little bit more enthusiasm. Maybe we think about life in different ways. There is something about tasting the deliverance of God that gives us spiritual eyesight to see life differently. There's something about these kind of things. There's something about the deliverance of God that gets you and I to focus a little better, to focus a little stronger, to think a little deeper, to have something inside of us that kind of changes a little bit when something that close takes place in our lives. Psalm 34 is a song of gratitude when God brings you and I out of a close call moment. The Psalms have a song for every season of life. They capture what we're thinking and feeling. They point us toward the heavens. They point us toward biblical examples and biblical thinking. They point us toward the worship of an almighty God. And in every season of our life, the Psalms help us to be honest. Help us to be honest with how we feel and toward God and toward others. And they give us real hope. And they show us what real hope is. When we preached about Psalm 1, we talked about the way of the righteous and the way of the wicked. In Psalm chapter 8, it tells us about the contrast between God and us. And David asked the question, God, how can you be mindful of us in the midst of all that is going on and who we are and what we do? In Psalm 9, it talks about that we would give thanks to God with our whole heart. And today, in this particular psalm, we have this opportunity to talk about some of the countless close call moments that you and I find in our lives. David's had a close call. David's close call, a unique way of looking at it. The American Standard, it says of David in the beginning, before Psalm 34, in that little heading, it says, a psalm of David when he changed his behavior before Abimelech, so that he drove him out, and he went away. In other versions, in NIV, New King James, it talks about how David acted like a madman, how David acted crazy. We'll talk a little bit more about this particular story. David wrote this psalm right after a dangerous situation that you can find in 1 Samuel. Saul, the first king of Israel, was a failure. He wouldn't obey God. When God gave him specific, absolute direction, he didn't listen. And so God chose someone else. In the middle of his reign, God chose David to be king. In God's providence, determining what was going to happen, David became part of Saul's inner circle, part of his court, and a leader in Saul's military. David was someone who the people cried out, Saul kills his thousands, but David kills his tens of thousands. And so over time, Saul began to become jealous of David's success. And he began to get all raged up inside and wanted to do something. He could smell the affection of the people that they had for David. And so finally, Saul's son, Jonathan, tells David of the plans of his father, that David's life is in danger. And so he leaves his homeland, and he basically goes to his arch enemy. He goes to the land where Goliath lived. He goes to Philistia. And he goes there where the Philistines live, and he's trying to make a home there. And he's kind of maybe wanting to become a mercenary for the king, Achish, the king of Gath. And yet the servants in the court recognize who he is. And they tell the king that he's a famous Jewish warrior. And of course, remember, when he's just a boy now, when he kills Goliath back in Samuel 17, here in chapter 21, Saul refused to give him his daughter until he killed 100 Philistines and brought back their foreskins. David had killed a lot of the people from this country. So he is not in friendly territory. He is not in a place where he is liked or cared about very greatly. So in 1 Samuel 21, verses 12 through 15, it tells us what happened next. And David took these words to heart and was much afraid of Achish, the king of Gath. And so he changed his behavior before them and pretended to be mad and to have madness in their hands, and scratched the doors of the gate and let his saliva fall down from his beard. So in other words, David pretended to be crazy. And he began to foam at the mouth. And he began to scratch at the gate and act like a nutcase. One time my brother asked me, what do you do when people mess with you? Brother was 10 years younger than me. And I told him, son, I'll tell you what you do. You go and act like a nutcase. And so one time these guys came around, and I just went out there and just acting like a fool. I mean, it's like a complete fool. Just started kicking stuff, throwing stuff, grabbing myself, pulling my own hair, doing all this crazy stuff. And they were looking at me like, this guy's insane. He's nuts. And they didn't bother me. This is bizarre stuff. David's clawing at this gate, foaming at the mouth, trying to figure out what's going on, pretending to be insane. And now the king doesn't want to have anything to do with him. In verse 14, then Acacia said to his servants, behold, you see the man is mad. Why have you brought him to me? Do I lack madmen, that you have brought this fellow to behave as a madman in my presence? Shall this fellow come into my house? The king said, look, have I run out of crazy people in my country? That you've brought this guy? Do I not have enough nut jobs around here that you're going to have to bring him? Well, why is he here? David is delivered from the hand of the king of the Philistines, and he writes Psalm 34 as a celebration of what God has done for him. His experience of deliverance, his experience of being chased in his own homeland and wanting to be killed by the king, to winding up in Philistine country and realizing that he has to do something because these guys hate him maybe even more than Saul does. And God delivers him. This gives him some spiritual thought and some spiritual sight that he possibly has never had before. He sees life differently. This psalm is very important because it can give you and I eyes of faith. It can give you and I eyes to see and ears to hear, to see and listen to life so much differently as it gets scary. So I have 6 taste and see statements as we look at Psalm. There are 6 of them. Number 1, taste and see that God is awesome. God is awesome. In verses 1 through 3, I will bless the Lord at all times. His praise shall continually be in my mouth. This shout of joy. I've just gotten delivered from the hands of my enemies. I'm going to praise the Lord all the time. I just had a fork off of the bobcat that I was hauling that just actually bounced off of the roadway and pierced right through my truck and didn't go in my skull. I'm going to praise the Lord with everything that I have. I just actually blew a tire and was carrying driving with a trailer, and I didn't crash this whole thing. I was just driving a semi and my brakes went out. And I'm on a terrible decline. And it's rain. Something is happening, and I made it through. I didn't crash it. I didn't jackknife it. I didn't turn it over. Nothing happened. Somebody passed 8 cars like they always try to do on Highway 12. If you're one of those, you need to quit that. Because you don't know what I say about you when you drive by. I'm not lying. You don't know. You're causing me to wish for you to get in a wreck. Because what I see is when you get in a wreck, I'm not stopping. I'm going to drive by. And I'm going to go, you are so dumb. But that's what happens. People are doing it. I've seen it. I've seen it. They passed me coming down Victor Road. It's 45 miles an hour in my big city of Victor. Quit going 60 down there. And so, I myself am driving 48. Kathy's driving 42. And, she's driving 42. She's like that lady in Ferris Bueller. Her hands up, the guy's trying to swerve past her. Everybody's trying to pass. We don't want all this stuff. The idea here is that there's a powerful thing that's happened in David's life. He's experienced something that is allowing him to commit to continual praise in his heart and life. David has seen God personally deliver him. Verse 2, he says, "My soul makes its boast in the Lord. Let the humble hear and be glad." This word boast in the Hebrew, halal, means to supremely be thankful or satisfied with something great. It's used all over the Psalms as a means to call people to worship. And in particular, David is interested in calling those who know their place. Let the humble hear and join in. We talked about this a few weeks ago when we were talking about the Psalms, where we asked the three questions. What is it to worship? What is it to come in contact with God? And what is the church? And we said what worship is listening. It's more than singing. So many people sing the same old songs every week, day in and day out. They sing the songs and they never, ever once listen to the words. You know why I know that? Because they've never changed. They're still the same. There's a difference between singing a song and a song being sung in your heart. You and I need to realize that we need to listen. We need to hear. God is awesome. And I realize that maybe awesome isn't even a strong enough word. But God is great. He's awesome. He's wonderful. He's all these things. There is nothing like a great deliverance to motivate you and I to think how great God is and to try to get other people to think it too. That's why David uses this word that means make great, magnify, raise up, exalt, to describe what happens, what he wants to happen in verse 3. These are these moments of great deliverance for you and I. They serve as a spiritual telescope. They make the bigness and the majesty and the exaltedness of God clear and near. They show how great God is in these up-close moments. These moments can confirm what we know in theory, that God is great. Come taste and see that God is awesome, that he's good. If you've tasted and seen God's awesomeness and the deliverance that he's given you, then share that joy with others. Then number 2, taste and see that God can do it. God can do it. Some of the things that we try to do is that we don't know if God can actually do what he's asked us to do. We think that something else is going on, that God possibly can't meet us where we want to be met, that maybe our expectations are too high, and that God can't do it, or that God really has an ability to rescue us in our time of need, in our time of trouble. In verses 4 through 7, David recounts the fact that when you and I have nothing left but God, nothing left but God, nothing left but desperation and God, nothing left but our own path and God, nothing left but everything that we've tried before and God, nothing left except every avenue that we've tried to go by, everything that we've destroyed, everything that we've broken, every step that we've taken, and just having that and God left. Where do we go? Where do we turn to? What do we do? David is going to recount his experience and commend to us trusting in the wisdom of God. David wants you and I to see that God is able to powerfully help those who put their hope in him. That God is able to help those who trust him. That there's a spiritual confidence that comes from trusting the Lord. He seems to say the same thing in verses 4 and 5 as he says in verses 6 and 7. David tells us in 4 and 5 that when he sought the Lord's help, that a spiritual victory took place. When he sought out the Lord, that he was answered, that he was delivered from his fears, David received a level of spiritual confidence and peace. Verse 5 reinforces this by saying that there is a spiritual radiance which is given to those who seek the Lord in crisis. Life may be hard, but those of us that have found the presence of the Lord to be sweet and comforting and empowering. In verses 6 and 7, people in fear or pain feel weak, but seemingly powerless people or a powerless person has every reason in the world to be confident. Why? And hopeful. Why? In verse 6, it's an echo of what he said in verse 4. In David's desperation, God heard him and helped him. When you and I call out to God, God will hear. When you and I cry out to God, God will hear. When you and I beg God, God will hear. When there's nothing left but God, God will hear. This image in verse 7 of the story to consider as David portrays God's protection around him, like an angel that is guarding his very life. My grandmother had dementia later on in life, and she literally believed that there was somebody sitting in a tree every night outside her house. And somebody was like, what are you going to say to her? So I'm not going to say anything to her. The lady sleeps with a whistle around her neck. I'm not going to say anything to her. If that's what she believes, if she wants to believe that there's somebody out there watching her, protecting her, let her think that. Now, when she started believing that there were kids living in her attic, I got a little bit crazy. And when everybody was telling me about it and I never heard it, I wasn't sure what was going on, and I went over there, and just as I came in the door, she's shutting her bedroom door, telling the kids, you guys need to be quiet. And I said, well, what are you talking to? The kids that are up there in the attic. I said, Grandma, you don't have an attic. It's just the ceiling. Jimmy. She pointed her finger right at me. She goes, they have to go down, then they go up. Right on, man. Right on. Okay. Right on. Don't argue with Granny, man. Don't argue with Granny. She's been chewing Levi Garrett for 40 years. All right? You can't get past her on that. You and I need to have the right spiritual perspective. We need to see what God wants us to see, and God is trying to show us God can do it. There's a good illustration of this. It's a situation that happened with the prophet Elisha when he was in the city of Dothan in 2 Kings chapter 6. The king of Syria was trying to defeat Israel, and Elisha was using his prophetic powers to tell the king of Israel about the plans of the king of Syria. So the Syrian army surrounded the city where Elijah lived, trying to capture him. In 2 Kings 6, 15 through 17, this is what it says. It says, then the servant of the man of God rose up early in the morning and went out. Behold, an army with horses and chariots was all around the city. And the servant said, alas, my master, what shall we do? He said, don't be afraid, for those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And then Elisha prayed and said, oh Lord, please open his eyes that he may see. And so the Lord opened the eyes of the young man. You know what he saw? He saw the mountain was full of horses and chariots of fire all around Elisha. You know what God did? God allowed this kid to see that there were people encamped around that protected. God had put a literal hedge of protection around Elisha. And when his servant looked out, what he saw horses everywhere with chariots of fire everywhere. God worked a miracle in this life. Why? Because he wanted him to see that he can do it. God can do it. God can protect you. God can help you. God can save you. God can heal you. God can redeem you. God can help you to overcome. God can get rid of your addiction. God can get rid of your porn habit. God can get rid of your gambling habit. God can get rid of any kind of habit. The eating habit that I have, God is going to take it away. Why? Because I'm sick and tired of feeling sick and tired. I'm tired of things around me taking away my joy. And God will help me if I will trust Him. Thank you, Mouse. So when you and I are tempted, we're in despair, John 4, 1 John 4:4 says, greater is He that is in you than who? He that is in the world. God has done it in the past, He'll do it again. We sing that Elevation worship song. Yo, He'll do it again. We sing it all the time. Number 3, God. Taste and see that God is good. When? All the time. Right? God is good all the time. This third statement captures the essence of the entire psalm as David invites all the readers, the singers, to experience God the way that He has experienced Him. He says, come and taste and see that the Lord is good. Come and taste and see that there's something better than what you've experienced in your life before. Come and taste and see that my God will take you out of the darkest places that you've ever been. That my God will bring you to the highest mountains that you've ever seen. That my God will allow you to do things that you've never dreamt that you could do. That my God will allow you to laugh harder than you ever laughed before. That my God will allow you to experience tears that have never flowed before. That my God will do things for you that you thought would never be done. He's good all the time. He's commending us to trust, taking a wise and prudent step in our lives. Blessed is the man who takes refuge in Him. Taste the Lord and see that He is good, and happy are those who take refuge in Him. This picture that David paints for us is one of safety. It's one of security. It's one of happiness for God-focused hearts. God provides for those who make Him their trust. Those who fear have no lack in verse 9. Those who seek the Lord lack no good thing in the second half of verse 10. The Bible tells us that God will supply all of our needs according to His riches in glory. Doesn't mean that every person's going to get a Cadillac. I don't want a Cadillac, I want a Ferrari. Right? You see me riding in a Ferrari? Holy smokes, I can't see that at all. Right? A Kia Soul is about as far as I'm going. All right? Now, it doesn't mean that we're going to get everything that we desire, but it does say that we're going to get everything we need. Everything that we need. Right? Hello? Okay. If you know the New Testament at all, you're going to know that this sounds familiar. David is saying there is satisfaction in God. There is hope in God. The Apostle Paul makes some of these things very clear when he says in Romans 8, 27 and 28, and we know that those who love God, and we know for those who love God, all things work together for good for those who are called according to His purpose. In verse 32 and 33, He who did not spare His own Son, but gave Him up for us all, how He will not also be with Him graciously give us all things. And in 2 Corinthians 9 and 8, God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may abound in every good work. When is God good? All the time. God is good? All the time. Very good. And then number 4, taste and see that God's way works. God's way. God's way. I can't emphasize that anymore. I'm telling you what, if you and I took every piece of paper, every way that we've tried, and wrote it down on a piece of paper, and realized all the ways that we've tried and failed, and we wrote it down on a piece of paper, we would all be buried in that paper right now. Because we would take it, we would wad it up, and we would throw it in file 9. We would take it and wad it up and throw it in file 9. Why? Because we've been trying all of our life to find something that works. Something that'll lead us from our hopelessness. Something that'll mend our brokenness. Something that'll transform our lives from a dullness to joy. Something that'll take us from our addictions to actually being in our right mind. Something that will take us from the places that we've went that are in darkness to where we can actually walk in the light. God's way works. Sometimes Psalms can sound a lot like Proverbs. Here's an example. Verses 11 through 14. Verse 11, David invites people to learn about the fear of the Lord from his experience. In verse 12, it says, long life and blessing comes to the person who chooses God's path. And even in verse 13, he advises us that we need to watch how we talk. Folks, our tongues are so very important, so very vital. James says it's just a little member. Man, it burns and destroys like a big fire. It's just a little thing. Verse 14, David has seen the blessings of obedience, so he can exhort, he can call out to those of us who are reading and singing this psalm to remember that obedience brings blessing. But that rebellion, disobedience, is as the sin of witchcraft. You and I need to realize that there's a difference. Why does David mention this at this point? He gives some advice at this point because he knows that following God's commands takes courage. It takes faith, especially in a culture in which we live that's so hostile toward Christians, toward faith, toward truth. In a culture that's so hostile toward the way we live our lives. To believe God's promises, to heed God's commands, to listen to God's voice, means that David's not going to kill the king. David's not going to take matters into his own hands. He's not going to kill Saul because Saul is trying to kill him. All the time that David, before Saul had died, all that time that Saul was trying to kill him, and even a time when David snuck right up on him and could have killed him, he didn't do it because he said that you cannot touch God's anointed. It wasn't David's job to remove Saul. That was God's job. Sometimes you and I, we want to do God's stuff. We want to do God's bidding in a way that is our bidding. We want to do God's ways in our ways. Doesn't work that way. God has a way that is not your way. God's ways are greater than our ways. And God's way works. It actually works. Have you ever taken, you know what? When I go buy Christmas gifts, I spend about 25 minutes. I go one store, find everything I need, and I go. Done. Man, dude, bro, I don't mess around. This is not an all-day process. I got chairs sitting to do. And so I go, one time I decided I'm going in one of those things, as seen on TV stores. Bad move. There's a lot of bad juju in that place. So there's a reason why all that stuff's in there, because they can't put it on TV no more. Anyways, so I found one of these things. It's like an egg flipper. But it's supposed to be almost like a pancake thing. It's like a singular thing. But when you take it, you can turn it over, and it says like on the egg thing, you can take it, flip it over, man. and you got it, it's cool. Except when you flip it over, the egg flies right out. It flew right out of the thing, right onto my table, just right on the floor. It just flew. It was like an egg flinger more than an egg flinger. They should have changed the name. And then they should have put it as seen in Jimmy's Kitchen. The egg flinger. And so, I wrote these guys a letter. They sent me $20. Literally in cash. And another one. So I put the egg in there, flip it, flew right on the floor. Right? Why I'm even talking about this right now, I'm not exactly sure. Except for the fact is, sometimes we try to do it our way. And just take a regular skillet, man. Do your regular thing. You don't have to have no fancy flipper, fancy flinger, you know? You don't need the fancy flinger. There was an article that illustrated something that's kind of crazy. God has a design for life. He has a design for families. He has a design for husbands and wives and children. And marriage is under attack in our world. It's under attack in our culture. It's under attack in the church. We don't value it. We don't think it's important. We don't think it's all that special. And yet God ordained it. And there was a crazy statistic that was in one of the articles that somebody was reading about families. And it said that nearly half of the American dads that were surveyed in this particular article, that they did not live, they had at least one child that lived away from their household. That was born out of wedlock. And that the share, for the most part, of fathers that were living apart from their children was more than double than what it was a long time ago. Or not so long ago. The story behind the story is this. Is what happens to a culture when you and I attempt to do things contrary to God's ways. When you and I ignore God's ways. When you and I ignore what God has ordained. When we ignore God's law. When we ignore what God sets up. When we ignore. So what we begin to do is we begin to consider having children, and that children are like a trophy, and that, you know, you can just have kids any way you want to and every way you want to and all this kind of stuff. The fact of the matter is that the kids are supposed to be held for a time in which man and woman join together and they get married. A lot of craziness in our world. You and I need to realize that God's way works. David is trying to remind us of this. Number 5, God takes and see that God is not ignoring us. One of the beautiful moments of deliverance is a reminder that God hears the cries of those who need Him. It's a great truth to remember that, because most of our lives are spent waiting for God to act, waiting for God to move, waiting for God to do something. We can wind up thinking that God is not listening, or that God is ignoring our cries for help. So on the heels of great victory, David is reminding anyone who reads Psalm 34 that God really does listen. Verse 15, God is not ignorant of what is happening in our life. He sees, He knows, He does truly hear the cry of our heart. In verse 16, God knows that the unrighteous, He knows what they've done. And He is against those who do evil. And judgment will come one day. In verse 17, God takes our prayer seriously. And He is able to give us the strength and the power to be free. In verse 18, God is near to those who have a broken heart. And He saves the crushed in spirit. It's very easy for you and I to think that because God is not acting immediately or in our time frame or in our timeline, that he does not really care. Sometimes the circumstances seem overwhelming, or even like the circumstances are going to crush us, or even like we're not going to make it. This is the last straw. Nothing can help me. David reminds every hurting heart that those who put their trust in God find real comfort and hope. This is one of the great contrasts of the New Testament, that the humble receive help. No one comes to receive the forgiveness of their sins without first admitting that they need help. Matthew 18:3. Put that up for me, Kenny. I say, surely I say to you, unless you are converted and become as little children, you will no means enter into the kingdom of heaven. You and I need to humble ourselves in order for things to change. Beyond that, 1 Peter 5:6-7. God opposes the proud but gives grace to the humble. Humble yourselves, therefore, to the mighty hand of God, so that at the proper time he may exalt you, casting all your anxieties, all your care on him. Why? Because he cares for you. And then number 6, he is our ultimate hope. We come to this last statement, in which yet another concept that we will find throughout the Psalms. David looks beyond our immediate circumstances. He looks beyond what is happening right at this moment. And he looks to an ultimate hope that we have in God. He looks past the present. He looks past what is going on right now, even beyond death itself, to deliverance that God will personally bring. David uses this single instance, this single happening in his life with God's help as a platform to acknowledge that his life is filled with a lot of trouble, with a lot of difficulties, with a lot of heartache. Yet he also knows that God in the end will deliver. He will deliver us out of all of them. In other words, affliction doesn't win. God does. Addiction doesn't win. God does. Pornography doesn't win. God does. Alcoholism doesn't win. God does. All kinds of trouble in our marriage and in our relationships, and business trouble, financial trouble, and jealousy, and wrath, and backbiting, and cursing, and fighting. None of that wins. God wins. We need to realize that this happens in all of our lives. Many are the afflictions of the righteous, but the Lord delivers him out of them all. Verse 19 of Psalm 24. Life is hard, but God will make it right. God also protects the righteous in the darkest days. And David uses a metaphor in verse 20, which the Gospel of John references when Jesus was crucified. On the eve, Jesus was still cared for, even as he bore the curse of sin. In verse 21, it points us toward the coming judgment of the wicked. There will be a day when those who hate the righteous will be condemned. There will be a day when those who call Christians and who slaughter them for no reason, those who call Christ nothing and worthless, those who go against the hand of Almighty God, they will be condemned. Those who pay homage to Satan and homage to evil and homage to spilling of blood, that they will pay for the carnage that they have spread. There's going to be a coming judgment for the wicked. David concludes with another gospel rumbling statement. None of those who take refuge in him, none of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. Speaking of something clearly celebrated by Christ in the New Testament. So as they come back, I'm going to finish up. The eternal close call. The eternal close call. What is beyond this? What is beyond Psalm 34? What is beyond our life here on earth? Every one of us who are here today will have to give an account to God for our life. I'm not exactly sure how that's going to look. I'm not exactly sure how crazy it will be, but there's one clear thing, that it will be revealing. The revealing of our unworthiness, the revealing of our sins, and the beauty of God in comparison will be something that will be overwhelming to many. The devastation and the anguish that we can feel at that particular time, knowing who we really are and knowing who God really is, the verdict of guilt will be overwhelming, convincing, and clear. In front of us will be a holy God. Standing in front of him will be sinful people. The only hope for our soul are the promises that he's given us in his word. The only hope for our soul are the promises that he's given us in his word. We will stand before a holy God. And the only thing that I'll have, what will you do when it comes down to just God? That's it. And unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, at this particular time now, it's already too late if you haven't made a choice. And when you make the choice of not making a choice, you say no. But if you made a choice and you stood on the promises of God, you can trust Romans 5:8. But God gives, shares, commends, pushes his love toward us, and that while we are still sinning, Christ died for us. And even in verse 9, since therefore we have now been justified by his blood, much more shall we be saved by him from the wrath of God. We'll be able to stand on that promise. Did you know that? That we'll be able to stand before a beautiful and holy God because God has made that promise to us, and we can stand on it if we'll trust in it today. And Romans 8:1 says, there is therefore now no guilt, condemnation to those who are in Christ Jesus. So in other words, when confronted by the holiness of God and the devastating guilt of our lives, the holy hope is in that God counts us forgiven and righteous in his Son, in Jesus. Taste and see that Jesus is good. Taste and see that his love for you is good. Taste and see that forgiveness is good. Taste and see that all of your life can be changed forever and that it's good. Taste and see that you can stand before God someday and be counted worthy to stand in his presence. Why? Because of his Son. Taste and see that God is good. Today is your day. Get past the close call and taste and see his goodness today. Will you stand?